Okay, I want to give a little bit of clarity first here about some stuff with exponents. I mean, most people are usually okay with the idea that if I say 5 to the 7th power, I really mean 5 times 5 times 5 times 5 times 5 times 5 times 5. But shoot, that's a way easier way to write it than all these 5s all lined up multiplied. It just makes it look a lot cleaner. So that's usually okay with people. Where they get kind of frustrated with me is when I write something like, okay, so what is 3 to the 0 power? 0 power? What the heck does that mean? I mean, you can't multiply 3 by itself 0 times. That doesn't make any sense. So here's the way I want to look at it. Let me erase this for just a second. And I'm going to ask you, do you know what 2 to the 4th power means? Well, sure. It means 2 times 2 times 2 times 2, so it's 16. Okay? And you know what 2 to the 3rd power is. That's 2 times 2 times 2, so that's 8. And 2 to the 2nd power is 2 times 2, so that's 4. And which means 2 to the 1, well, that's just 1, 2 lined up, so there you go. Okay? That's okay. Well, then what do we mean by 2 to the 0? Well, I want you to notice a pattern here. As I go down the list, look what happens to the numbers. You're divided by 2 every time. Okay? Divide by 2. Divide by 2. Okay? So what are you going to get when you divide by 2 again? Well, 1. Okay, so 2 to the 0 somehow means 1. Well, if I do the same thing with 3's, 3 to the 4th, that is 81. And 3 to the 3rd, that's 27. And 3 to the 2nd, that's 9. And 3 to the 1st, that's 3. Notice you're dividing by 3 every time now. Okay? So next time, divide by 3, you get 1 again. So apparently, any number that you take to the 0 power just means 1. Okay? So even if I were to write x to the 0 power, it's still 1. Okay? So we've taken care of this idea of having a 0 power. It looks a little funny, but it works for us. Okay? So how could you possibly then have an exponent that's negative? Well, let me go back to a pattern we were using before. 2 to the 3rd was 8. 2 to the 2nd was 4. 2 to the 1st was 2. 2 to the 0 was 1. Okay, so let's just keep going with the pattern. 2 to the negative 1. Well, remember we were dividing by 2 every time. So divide by 2, divide by 2, divide by 2. Well, 1 divided by 2, that's 1/2. Okay, and let's keep going. 2 to the negative 2. So apparently 1/2 divided by 2, that's 1/4. And 2 to the 3rd power, sorry, negative 3rd power. Try that again. 2 to the negative 3rd power apparently is 1/4 divided by 2, so that's 1/8. Okay, so it just keeps on going. Well, I want you to notice a cool thing here. 1 over 4 is the same thing as 1 over 2 to the 2nd power. Okay? And 1 over 8 is 1 over 2 to the 3rd power. So it looks like 2 to the negative 5 then would be the same thing as 1 over 2 to the positive 5. Okay? And that's how it works. If you have a negative exponent on something, you can just write it under a 1, 1 over 2 to the 5th. Okay? So if you tell me, hey, Mr. Neckenham, there's an x to the negative 6th power, I'll just say, no problem. Write it as 1 over x to the positive 6th power. Okay? And then that takes care of it for you. So a negative exponent basically kind of means take whatever you've got here and put it in the denominator with a positive exponent. Okay? Well, the question comes up then, that's great, but what happens if somebody has written 1 over x to the negative 5? What do you do then? Well, it looks a little sloppy at first, but let me show you what happens. Okay, based on what you know, what you just learned, you know that x to the negative 5 is the same thing as 1 over x to the positive 5. Okay, so now I've got a fraction over a fraction in a fraction, I really don't like having that. That looks pretty sick. So I'm going to write it this way. 1 divided by 1 over x to the 5. Okay? And you might remember from back in your work in pre-algebra that when you divide by a fraction is the same thing as multiplying by its reciprocal. So I'm going to write that as x to the 5 over 1. Okay? In other words, just x to the 5. So I want you to look at where we went. We started here at 1 over x to the negative 5, where you had a negative 5 in the denominator as an exponent, and now it became a positive 5 in the numerator. Okay? So here's what happened. If you had a negative exponent in the denominator, you just put it in the numerator with a positive exponent. So in general, if you've got some expression with a negative exponent somewhere, okay, we'll just take that thing with the negative exponent, put it upstairs with a positive exponent. Now, you can either put a 1 down here, or you can just erase all that stuff entirely and just write it as as 3x squared. Okay? And if you have something with a negative exponent up top, let's just go like this here, and we'll kind of go a little crazy here. It has a negative exponent up top, so we'll put it down below with a positive exponent. This one already has a positive exponent, so we'll leave it there. This one had a negative exponent, so we'll put it upstairs with a positive exponent. And now it's simplified.